One day each of us will close our eyes for the final time. Our hearts will slowly cease to beat, and our last breath will whisper through silent lips as we leave this existence behind. Yet is this truly the end? Do we simply cease to be as the last spark races from our brains along cooling neurons to its final destination in oblivion? Or does the part of us that is uniquely our own continue beyond the grave? Is there existence beyond the temporal? And if so, what mysteries might that existence hold? There are those who would have us believe that our lives end with our final tomorrow, that the physical world is both our beginning and ultimate end. There are also those who reject this explanation, instead contending that the physical world is simply one aspect of an existence which may stretch on through eternity. For now, we are left to wonder if the strange apparitions are a product of our feverish minds, or if ghosts do haunt the fringes of the material world. The ultimate truth may lie somewhere between, unknown to us until we each pass beyond that veil. And between our searching eyes and that veil lies a path that leads us to the shadows of legend. Hello, this is Charles Romans, and welcome to Shadows of Legend. Today we're speaking with Jeff Davis from South Carolina. He's had some paranormal experiences while hunting. So how are you today, Jeff?
I'm doing fine. How about yourself?
I'm doing well so far. You got a pretty interesting story there. Won't you just give us a little bit of background?
Yeah, so I'm a deer hunter, and
Yes.
It was actually Halloween night, and it was around 2008, and I was hunting with some friends, and they dropped me off to go get in the deer stand, and there was a path about 300 yards long to get to the deer stand. Well, the path happened to cut right through an old cemetery in the middle of some planted pine trees. On the way in, I didn't pay too much attention to it. I was more worried about, seeing the dates on the graves, which most of them were very early 1900s, but I seen where someone was born in the 1800s. But I went on about my business, made it to the stand, seen a few deer. It was kind of, in South Carolina, I don't know if you know, October is like a transitional month. So it can be 85 degrees on Halloween night, or it can be 40 degrees.
Right.
But it was just one of those nights to where there was it was a very light fog because the stand was on the border of a swamp. And as I was walking out and got up on the hill part and started walking back through the cemetery, right on the edge of the cemetery, I seen something light up beside a pine tree, and it was so bright that it, lit up the bark on the tree. And it was probably about 50, 60 feet because the cemetery itself was not all that big. And what was so unique about the cemetery to me is that it was in the planted pines. So of course they didn't plant pine trees on top of the grave. So the trees had grown up, and it almost was like, and not to sound, like too haunted housey here, but it was almost like the cemetery was in its own little room within the planted trees because
Right.
of how they grew up around. And I, in my mind, I was like, well, that's weird. That's definitely a lightning bug, even though, I hadn't seen any, since summer. So, I just kind of waved it off as whatever. And then all of a sudden over this little graveyard, and, I still, my hair still stands up on end talking about it right now. All these little orbs is the best I can describe it, about the size of baseballs and about head high, just started glowing over the top of it. And it was like a light show, and it lasted, I don't know, it seemed like an eternity, but it probably was more like 10 or 15 seconds. And they would light up and then kind of go, dim out, but they were very bright. And I was just in shock. I was staring. And then all of a sudden, I just said, think it was my buddy screwing with me somehow, some way, because it was Halloween night. I don't know if I mentioned that, but
Yes.
It was Halloween night. So I said, hey, don't mess with me, guys. I was like, I got a gun here. We're hunting. I was like, quit screwing around with me. And just as I said that, one of them lit up 6 inches in front of my face, and I seen it perfect. It was a perfect sphere, and honestly, it was the size of a baseball. And I know this might sound weird. It felt peaceful. It really did. But I'm 6'4", 265-pound dude, and it scared me so bad. I'm not gonna lie to you that even though it felt peaceful, it still scared me so bad. I ran the rest of the way out to the highway. Didn't wait around to see what it was, or ask any questions. I stood out there pacing back and forth. It took my buddy, about 5 minutes to get over there to me. And I got in the truck all in a panic. And I told him what had happened. And he said, nobody really liked to hunt that stand because you did have to walk through that cemetery. But he said that nobody had ever, said anything as far as paranormal happened.
Well, it might be a good time to interject something here. Typically in the South, the landscape's kind of dotted with these family cemeteries or cemeteries that were part of a community that might no longer exist or might got absorbed by a larger community, something along those lines. So actually running into a cemetery like that isn't a unique occurrence.
Correct.
But now you had said that about 300 yards. So none of these orbs, as you call it, could have been made by headlights from a adjacent road or anything like that?
No, because the cemetery is about halfway in, so you're talking about 125, 150 yards in from these woods, and you got to think, because the stand was in the swamp, it was all downhill to the stand, because as everything just kind of goes downhill to the water. So even kind of looking back up, it wasn't a big hill. I mean, we're not in the mountains or anything, but still, it was enough of a slope to where, and yeah, it definitely was not car lights. And the one that lit up in front of my face, I mean, I can't explain it, but it was right there. I mean, there was no way in my mind, of course, that it was car lights.
Well, most people that mention seeing orbs, they're just light, whether you would say white light or yellow light, like would come from a flashlight or something along those lines. Were these all the same color, or were they different colors? Or
Yes, sir. I would say they were, about the color of like what you would think of an LED, like being white, the white light LEDs, kind of like that bluish white color.
Oh, okay.
Every one of them was that color. Now, mind you, I don't think we had LEDs, quite yet that far back, because like I said, it was around 2008. Maybe we did, but it was like that color. It had like a bluish bright white, but all of them were exactly the same size, shape, and color.
Now, I have to ask, was this your first paranormal encounter or strange encounter?
Well, yes. I mean, like that. As a kid, of course, we used to go camping up in North Carolina at a place back then was called Red Hawk Ranch. Okay. And the cabin, the clubhouse, they called it, that everyone went up there and ate at and stuff, was said to be haunted. And me and my brother would sneak up there at night, and I guess we were younger. I can't say for sure that we had any type of paranormal experience. We thought we heard things, as kids, but I can't say for sure. But for sure, this time was definitely a paranormal experience in my mind.
Now, you had also mentioned that your friends had said that other people didn't want to use that particular deer stand because they had to walk through the cemetery, or at least around the cemetery. So were there other people that reported seeing strange lights or anything out of the ordinary?
No, sir. Like I said, he said that nobody had ever mentioned anything crazy happening like that walking through there. Everybody just kind of got the heebie-jeebies, if you know what I mean, especially on the way out or on the way in the morning time, because you go in the dark if it's morning hunt, and you come out in the dark if it's afternoon hunt. So
yes,
but other than that, nothing, he said nothing like that had ever happened.
I have to ask, a lot of times when people have a paranormal experience that they notice that there's a reduction in ambient sound. In other words, the insects will stop making noise. You don't hear small animals in the underbrush. Did you notice anything of that nature? Anything getting quiet before this happened?
As you said that, the hair stood up on my neck, because honestly, it did happen like that. It was kind of like I don't know how to explain it. And I thought it was because the pine trees had grown around the cemetery. And that's why I made the comment earlier that it felt like you were in a little room when you came through the cemetery, because of how the pine trees go up around. So I just thought that was more like a sound barrier. I know that might not make sense, but it just it's exactly what you just said. It really got kind of quiet. And it's like you could hear a pin drop.
And like I said, that's interesting, because a lot of people report that before, whether it's an experience with, what we would call the supernatural, like a spirit or something, or a cryptid, for instance, like sightings of Bigfoot or other sorts of cryptid.
Right. Yeah, it was definitely, there was a definite notice in sound. I mean, it went from, I could hear my leaf, taking steps through the pine straw and just things rustling, like you said, and all of a sudden it was just kind of like you walk into a room. I just can't explain.
See, now, amount of trees would have blunted sound a little bit, but it wouldn't have completely eliminated it under normal circumstances.
Right. Yes, sir.
It's just like right now we're having, I'm in Kentucky and we're having a warm trend. I can
Yes.
step out on my porch at night. I can hear the little frogs, they call them peepers, making noise out there in February.
Right.
And so there would be some sort of background noise like that. And
Right.
that's one of the things I just want to clarify.
Right.
Now,
Yeah. Go ahead.
Did this put you off from hunting that area, or
I've never been back to that stand.
so? Since you had your experiences, did any of your other friends or any of their friends have an experience? Because a lot of times once the first experience is had by whomever, then it seems to like open a floodgate, and then numerous other people have it.
Right. Not that I'm aware of. Honestly, I don't know of anybody else that's had any experiences there. I've since I've since quit hunting there, but I did hunt with my friend there for 3 more years. And as far as I know of, no one had any type of experience.
Mm-hmm. So I did ask if you'd been back there hunting, and you said no, but have you ever been back to the cemetery?
No, I have not. But every time I go by it, which is not that often, I'll go by it a couple times a year. It's not far from a little town called Lynchburg, South Carolina. And every time we go through there, I know exactly where the cemetery is. They've since cut the pines down around it and replanted them. So, the pine trees are kind of growing back up around the area. And I keep telling my wife, I'm like, I would really like to just stop and walk in there because, like I said, it's about 150 yards in the woods. But it's very easy to get to because of how the land lays out. There's only one way to get back in there. So, but it's right off of a major highway for that part of the country anyway. So it's, every time I go by, I do think about it every time and tell my wife the same story.
Well, I mean, it's a very interesting story and shocking. And like you said, the fact that it was Halloween made it, gave it a little bit of extra weight to it.
Right. Yeah, I mean, at first I thought my imagination was running away from me whenever I seen the light against the tree. I'm like, you didn't just see that. And I was like, well, it's obviously a light. And then when they all started glowing, over the top of the cemetery, the little teeny plot there, and then when that one lit up in front of me, it was like, and the thing was, I could see it perfectly. It was, like I said, it was a perfect sphere. And it had that bluish, bright white glow to it. And like I said, it honestly, and I know it doesn't make sense because someone asked on the page where I posted the story originally, if it felt peaceful, why'd you run? I was like, because I was in the middle of the woods and something random was happening like that I've never seen before, and it scared me. Even though because I'm a pretty big guy and I coon hunt and go all out in the swamps and stuff at night, I've never been spooked like that in my whole entire life. And that was just different.
Well, I know, of course, you did mention that it gave you a peaceful feeling, but you can have that peaceful feeling and still feel as though you don't belong there.
I did not belong there. You're right. I did not belong there. I definitely felt it's time to exit, and I did.
So now I have to ask, you've had time to think about this, obviously, more than, once. What do you think it was that you saw?
I honestly think it was just a manifestation of, a past life or something. I don't understand the spiritual world. I am a spiritual person, but what happens beyond this life, besides what I'm told in the Bible and stuff like that, I'm not too sure. But I definitely feel it was something manifesting. I don't know if it was to reach out to me or to scare me like it did. But I mean, honestly, I feel like it was a manifestation from people in the past. I mean, that's as simple as I could put it.
Well, there's an very ancient belief that certain times of the year, Halloween being one of them, that the veil between the living world and the next world, for lack of a better way to put it, is thinner, and sometimes the spirits can cross back over.
Right.
That's one of the reasons I asked you what you thought you'd encountered, because that would be a natural explanation of this.
Right. Yeah. I mean, it had to be something like that because, considering it's not, as far as I know, hasn't happened to anyone else since. And I never experienced anything like that before. It's just, I mean, I can't explain it. And I mean, people can take it for what it's worth, but I know what I've seen. It's definitely not a made up story. And I mean, it's paranormal. I mean, that's the best way I can describe it. But like I say, I feel like it was something spiritual.
And do you think that entities, for lack of a better way of putting it, were trying to communicate something to you, or do you think you just witnessed something that would have happened whether you were there or not?
I think I walked up on something that was going to happen. And then when I was there, the one that lit up in my face was just saying, "Hey, we know you're here." I mean, I honestly feel like that because the other ones were kind of off because I stopped, several feet before the cemetery, not too far, but far enough to where the things that were happening right over the top of the graves, I wasn't right up on them. And then this one just lit up right in front of me, like a foot in front of my face. And it was, I think it was something happening, and I just happened up on it. So they were like, "Okay, we're gonna let this guy know that we know he's here."
Well, now, to back up a little bit here, one of the things I did want to clarify, you had said something about the area being a little swampy.
Right. Well, about it turned into like swampland, probably about 50 yards from the stand. So you still had about another 100 yards down, a pine ridge, if you will, before it kind of turned into what we call wetlands.
Well, that's one of the things I was wanting to clarify, because when you mentioned swampy, of course, somebody that wanted to take away from the story would say, "Oh, it's just swamp gas." But there's a difference between something being a little swampy and being an actual swamp.
Right.
There's an acre field next to my house that in certain times of the year gets real wet and gummy, and you could say it's swampy, but it's not a swamp.
Right. No, I mean, down the hill is definitely the swamp. This Lynch's River swamp down there is the start of it. But I can tell you, graves are not going to be in a swamp area anyway, where water and stuff like that happens. Like I said, we were up on the hill probably 100 yards maybe up the hill from the swamp on good pine trees. And if you know anything about wetlands, and pines will not really grow in the wetlands like they do on a hill. So I mean, we were definitely in the vicinity of a swamp, but I feel we are far enough out for to kind of count that out. But hey, anybody who hears it and wants to make their own assumptions, that's their business.
Well, see, that's why I wanted to clarify that, because you weren't actually in a swamp. I never took it to mean that because I'm familiar with that kind of area. But someone who isn't familiar with that kind of landscape might think, "Oh, you were in a swamp, so you just saw swamp gas and, the rest of your imagination." And we want to eliminate that potential negative explanation.
Right, yeah. I mean, I don't know what swamp gas even looks like, but I can just tell you these things were perfectly round spheres. Well, that's all I can tell you.
And it's interesting that the one that actually interacted with you was larger.
Right. Yeah, it was definitely a little bit larger, and it might have been because it was a little bit closer. Because remember I said I stopped a few feet away, and it might have just been because it was a little bit closer. But I mean, I don't know how to explain it. It just was a very wild experience.
Well, see, and then that's part of the thing here is that I wasn't actually there. Right. So I don't have the benefit of, the other senses that you would have the benefit of actually being there and actually seeing this.
Right.
So what I'm trying to do is just, get enough information from you so that the listeners can either, I guess, compare that to another experience they've had or something that someone else has had, and get as clear a picture as possible. That's why I'm asking so many clarifying questions.
No, it's fine. Ask away, because I wish I had an answer.
Well, unfortunately, they're saying in so many instances there is no definitive answer.
Right.
I used to tell people the only perfect answers you can get are from basic mathematics. Proof of a paranormal encounter is very rare, simply because there's so much you can't qualify. Now, you know what you saw.
Yeah.
And you presented a very good case for what you saw. And people, it's basically up to the individual whether or not they choose to believe it.
Correct. Yeah, I mean, it was not my imagination. Like I say, I spent a lot of time in the woods at dark after midnight. Like I said, I coon hunt with friends, and so it's not my first rodeo as far as going in through the woods at dark, and I usually don't spook that easily. But this was something that I can honestly say that I've never experienced before. And it really it really did scare me. I'm not going to lie to you.
Well, I mean, honestly, if it didn't scare you or at least make you unsettled, it would be surprising because it's something so directly opposite of the normal. You said that you've been in the woods a lot at night, so you're familiar with night noises and reflections of moonlight and stuff like that. So you wouldn't be inclined to say, oh, that's paranormal. More like, oh, well, that's this or that or the other.
Oh yeah, exactly. I hear an owl screech at night, or a bobcat, or a fox, or something. I don't even flinch.
Hmm.
It doesn't bother me. I know exactly what it is.
Now, speaking of things along those lines, have you had any other experience with strange things or the
It's fun.
paranormal?
It's funny you ask. A buddy of mine that I do coon hunt with, or whatever. Me and him we like to artifact hunt, and we were arrowhead hunting, going to a spot that we're familiar with, and on the way to the spot, it's a cemetery in the area, and we were going down the road, and we were in his truck. Now this one, I don't honestly know what it was, but we both thought it was paranormal. But we were going down the road, and probably about 150 yards in front of the truck, where the cemetery would be off to the right, something, and I can't explain it again, but it looked like a figure that was kind of opaque and white, and it looked like a person all the way until you got down to about the knees, and there was nothing there, and it literally, like, it floated from the right side of the road to the left. And whenever I seen it, I literally wiped my eyes and I looked at my buddy, and he was kind of like had this look on his face, and he looked at me. He said, "Did you just see that?" And I was like, "Yeah." I was like, "Tell me what you seen," because I didn't want him to think that you know. And he said exactly what I just told you. And he was like, "What do you think that was?" Because he doesn't believe in ghosts or spirits or anything, like, as far as I know, as far as that goes, at all. And I was like, buddy, I don't know what to tell you. And, we've talked to several people about that do artifact hunting, and they said that they've had very similar experiences, maybe not with a legless figure, but with figures in general, like whenever they get around Native American sites, that it might be some type of warning or something to say, hey, leave our stuff alone around here. I mean, we're not digging graves or nothing. We're literally just walking fields that get plowed over.
I see.
But it was a very unique experience, and that's the only other paranormal experience that I could say, if it was paranormal, that I've ever had.
So now, before your first experience, I know you referenced being spiritual and you referenced the Bible, so I'm assuming that you are at least marginally religious.
Right. Yes, sir.
So before this first encounter, what were your thoughts about the paranormal and strange occurrences? How did you explain other people telling you things?
It's like I said, I honestly, I believe that anything's possible spiritually, as far as that goes, because out past this, out past this life, I don't know what God would allow a spirit to do. It does say, to be, absent from here is to be with God, or whatever. So, I might not have quoted that exactly right, but a lot as and so beforehand, I'm like, well, it's a possibility, because I honestly don't know what God allows and doesn't allow, as far as that goes. Like, does He allow people, their spirits to come back and visit Earth? I mean, I honestly don't know, and I don't
Okay.
want to sound like stupid here or nothing like that, but I thought anything was possible with that. Now, my wife, on the other hand, thinks that anything that presents itself like that isn't of God at all. She thinks it's more of a demonic, possibly has a dark or demonic purpose. But honestly, I don't know.
So after your experiences, are you more open minded to the paranormal?
Oh heck yeah, definitely. I mean, it's like, I've never seen Bigfoot. I feel the same. And it's kind of funny you had mentioned Bigfoot earlier. I've never seen Bigfoot, but
Okay.
I believe anything's possible, and I believe that there's a possibility. And if I would be walking through the woods and seen a 7-foot tall hairy dude standing behind a tree, I would feel the same way as I do now about these spirits
I
or
see.
whatever I see.
So I guess your statement to people in general is to keep an open mind.
Yeah, I mean, I would say keep an open mind. I'm not telling you what to believe they are one way or another. That's up for them to decipher. But I do know that I seen something that night, and I can't explain it. And there's definitely another, how can I say this, another realm or something that only presents itself whenever it needs to or whenever it wants to.
I see. So, do you think people should actively pursue this and look for it, or leave it alone? Just an opinion question.
I mean, if you want to look for it, that's fine. But now that this has happened to me, that's why I got interested in some cable TV show, ghost hunting shows,
Yes.
only after this happened. And I do know that these things supposedly can attach themselves to you. So I say I'm not going to mess with it. I'm not going to actively go out there and pursue it, but to each is their own. And if people want to investigate to try to prove or disprove the existence of something like that, I think that's up to them. But I would say go in cautiously. I would say go in with that open mind, but go in cautiously, because understand that from what I've read and from what I've heard, it's a possibility you might be taking something home with you that you don't want to.
And that's solid advice.
Right.
And I have to ask another question here. Why do you think it was you that saw this and not someone else?
I don't know. That's a question I actually asked myself a good bit. Like, why if it was intelligent, was it something, I don't know. Like, was it a sign from God? Because like I said, I am spiritual. Was it like a wake up call? Was it a warning? Was it? I mean, I honestly don't know, but I do. I wouldn't say I think about it all the time, but whenever I do go by there, I do get to that point in my mind to where I'm like, well, why the heck did it choose me? Those guys that actually own the land and hunt it all the time, blah, 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 they've never seen anything. Why me? So that is a good question. And I do think about it.
Well, now some people report seeing paranormal activity after some sort of major upheaval in their own lives. Was there anything like that going on with you before you went hunting?
No, I don't think so. I had just got married. Well, I say just got married. I've been married for like 3 or 4 years at that point. Everything was going pretty good. There was some turmoil in a church that we were attending, and it's shortly after that. I mean, I'm not even connecting the dots here, but I'm just saying there was some turmoil in a church that we were attending, and it was a small little town church, and it kind of literally went away not too long. It was less than a year after that experience happened.
It's interesting, like you said, not to connect the dots, but
Right.
to mention that a lot of people do report it after, like I said, a major upheaval. And then some people are just sensitive to these things.
Yeah. I may just be sensitive, but I may have just been sensitive to that one thing. And then the thing that happened, going to look for arrowheads, I have no idea what that was. It definitely looked like a figure with no legs. So maybe in a way, some way, shape, or form, I am a little more sensitive than other people.
But now there was no interaction on the floating apparition.
No, that thing looked more residual. If it was anything, I would call it residual. It just kind of was doing its thing. And like we tried to sit there and like we stopped actually and got out and looked for like a trash bag, like a white trash bag or anything that could have, kind of floated across the road or anything like that. And it was nothing like that. It was just a cemetery on one side and woods on the other. And if it would have been a bag, it would have got stuck in the trees.
Yeah, you would have thought there'd been some sign of it, yes.
Right. But no interaction there. It was just doing its thing.
See, I mentioned that because, of course, with the larger orb, it was interacting with you and giving you that feeling of peace.
Right. Well, I felt like there was interaction there. I felt like it was trying to, say hello or get out of here or something. I mean, but it felt peaceful. So it felt more like it was trying to say hello.
Yeah, or just a friendly warning off.
Right. Yeah. Like, mind your business.
So those were the only 2 experiences with paranormal you've had so far?
Yes, sir. That's it. And like I said, I don't go looking for it. So those are only 2.
Well, I appreciate you being on the podcast this evening and sharing your experiences with us. And if you have any more experiences, definitely reach out and we'll come back on here and talk about it some more.
I'll do it. Thank you so much for inviting me. I really don't talk about this too much to a lot of people, just because I don't want people to think I'm going crazy.
Well, that's
But
a
I
common
do
thing.
appreciate the opportunity to talk about it, because I think it's somebody else might hear it and it might help them talk about it if they need to.
Yes. And especially with people that have a much more traumatic experience with the paranormal than you had.
Right. Yeah. Mine was not traumatic in any way, shape, form, other than me just being a big scaredy cat and running.
Well,
But,
I don't know.
but
Sometimes discretion is the better part of valor, as the old saying goes.
yeah,
So,
it was definitely my dude run moment.
yes, and I don't think anyone in the world could fault you for that.
Right.
Well, we appreciate it. And for the moment, you have a good evening, and hopefully we'll talk again soon.
Yes, sir. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you.
This is Charles Romans, and on behalf of myself and our guests, thank you for joining us on this walk through the shadows of legend. If you like what you heard, please follow us and visit our website at shadowsoflegend.com and support our Patreon page to help keep the content flowing. And if you would like to be a guest and share your own brush with a stranger paranormal, don't hesitate to email us and include a contact number. The strange and surreal, the normal and the paranormal are all aspects of the world in which we live. As you reflect upon the stories we have shared, keep in mind that the people sharing these stories are actual, real people just like us. Were the stories shared compelling enough to be given credibility, or should they be relegated to the deeper part of the shadows? But when determining this, it might be a good idea to keep an open mind, because when we look around, we might discover that our own world is less brightly lit than we once thought. Until next time, I'll be waiting for you in the shadows of legend.